Mosaic, a daily news program from Worldlink TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Peace be upon you. This is the news in brief. The U.S. command in Iraq announces that it has killed about 70 Iraqis in an attack targeting what they call a terrorist training camp in northern Iraq, which was used by leaders of the previous regime of Saddam Hussein, Ba'ath members, and paramilitary forces. Meanwhile, in northern Baghdad, U.S. forces killed 27 Iraqis who attacked an armored tank patrol. Today, huge fires erupted in an Iraqi oil pipeline in northern Iraq near the Baghdad-Mosul border. Residents of the area confirmed that the fire was caused by two bombs that targeted an export pipeline to Turkey. Intense popular anger rose in Gaza, demanding revenge during the burial of the bodies of the wife and daughter of a Hamas leader, Yasser Taha. Hamas asserts that it will continue the armed resistance against Israeli occupation in the face of Israeli terrorism and calls for a complete war against it. Last night, 2 members of Islamic Jihad were martyred during a firefight with Israeli occupation army in Jenin in the north of the West Bank, while destroying the home of a person who conducted the Jerusalem operation. From Ramallah, Majid Saeed.
There is a tight siege and curfews on many cities and villages in the West Bank. Meanwhile, Palestinian activists' homes continue to be demolished. Arrest campaigns and political assassinations are Tel Aviv's declared policies. The Palestinians' last glimmer of hope depends on U.S. intervention to improve the deteriorating situation here.
About 300 to 400 people were killed and many others wounded in Liberia during battles that broke out several days ago between the Liberian government and rebels. This is the end of the news in brief. Peace be upon you. More than 90 Iraqis were killed and hundreds others were arrested following the most violent clashes between the U.S. forces and Iraqis. The U.S. command stated that these Iraqis were planning for the return of former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein.
This reminds us of what happened in Somalia and Vietnam. The U.S. soldiers are being attacked in Iraq almost on a daily basis. Thus, Operation Peninsular Strike, which has been launched 4 days ago and is concentrated in an area 70 kilometers north of Baghdad. The operation is carried out by thousands of U.S. soldiers, supported by warplanes and helicopters, killing about 15 Iraqis and arresting more than 400 others. The U.S. forces accuse organized groups of planning the attacks against them, specifically accusing Saddam Hussein's supporters and other Arab fighters.
There are indications that they are foreign fighters. It was a fierce battle, and they were very well equipped and trained. I believe that we will be seeing more of these groups in the future.
Following the collapse of Saddam Hussein's regime, about 30 American soldiers have been killed in attacks against them, an issue which is now of primary concern to the U.S. administration.
We are now seeing organized attacks. However, it's important to clarify that they are still small groups that may include 5, 6, or 10 people at any given time. Yet there is no evidence of a central command planning these attacks. But the attackers are organized and we have to deal with them.
In an effort to end all forms of Iraqi resistance and aggression against the American soldiers, Paul Bremer is taking precautionary measures by prohibiting any gatherings or speeches calling for resisting the occupation. Meanwhile, leader of the Iraqi National Conference, Ahmed Chalabi, insisted that former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein is behind these attacks against the U.S. forces. Chalabi added that Saddam is still alive and is also behind the downing of the Apache helicopter in western Iraq.
The disorder and destruction in Iraq that followed the collapse of the Iraqi regime has caused a serious absence of security. This led to the return of tribal traditions, but the Iraqis still don't have a peace of mind. They are living in constant anxiety and fear. One of the recent bad phenomena that has spread is the gangs that specialize in raping and kidnapping young women from the entrances of their schools. The following report illustrates how the young women's schools have transformed into semi-military compounds surrounded by barbed wire. Meanwhile, parents of schoolgirls are increasingly worried as rumors about recent kidnappings and sexual harassments continue.
Of course, these women worry about their future, not only on the educational level, but also on the social level, because they live in a very conservative tribal society. People are afraid because there are rumors about kidnapping young women and schoolgirls in the absence of security in Iraq. People are coping with that by staying home before dark falls, because they fear that something bad may happen. But how can people deal with the issue of kidnapping, and how can the schools prepare themselves for this distressing problem?
We are alert. We also have 2 male security guards at the school. They stay with us to help us.
There are ongoing meetings at the schools, which are now surrounded by barbed wire. Security guards, some of whom were volunteers, keep watch at the entrances of the schools. Parents give their daughters a ride to school and come back to pick them up. Most of the kidnapping cases take place at the end of the school day. Despite the fact that parents have organized transportation vehicles, many of them are still afraid.
Only God will prevent bad things from happening. We do not have anybody here. There's a little police presence, and when we go to the street, there's no police.
We want to have a normal life. We don't want to stay like this. Maybe some incidents have happened, but I didn't see anything with my own eyes. I only heard about them. So I don't know if the stories are true or not.
Some of the young women do not believe what's happening. They think that the stories are only horrible rumors. However, other women recall stories.
I heard that most stories happen in Al-Mansour area. My sister's friend was in the school. She left the school to meet her father in the car. She wanted ice cream, so her father went to buy ice cream. But when he came back, he did not find the car or the girl. They took the car and left.
How old was she?
She was born in 1986, so she must be 16 or 17 years old.
It appears that the local police have begun paying attention to this issue. Some police units are now present at the end of the school day. But is this enough to put an end to the horror that the Iraqis are experiencing in the street? While we were asking for their opinions, one young woman was assaulted. Fortunately, the police was present. However, our camera drew a lot of attention, and we were not spared their assaults. We do not know if this was a sexual harassment or a kidnapping attempt. The only one who knows is the young woman that was attacked.
No safety, no morals. We are women. Why are they not ashamed? Why are they not ashamed?
Hamza Hussein, Abu Dhabi Television, Baghdad.
The Israeli Apache gunships carried out an hour earlier another airstrike in a Sabra crowded neighborhood in Gaza City, killing at least 1 Palestinian and injuring more than 26 others. BBC reporters said that the Israeli Apache helicopters fired a number of rockets towards a civilian car in a Sabra area, killing Fuad al-Liddawi, 24 years old, from Jabalia town. Meanwhile, citizen Salim Saeed Salha, 45 years old, from Gaza City, died today from wounds he sustained since yesterday. Salha was one of the injured of the Israeli army's airstrike carried out yesterday in the Sheikh Radwan's area in central Gaza Strip, killing 7 other Palestinians. Palestinian masses in Gaza City sent off today to their final resting places the bodies of 7 Palestinians who were killed yesterday during an Israeli Apache gunship airstrike carried out in central Gaza City. The citizens are Yasser Taha, his pregnant wife, and their 3-year-old daughter Afnan, as well as Jihad Saudi and Sayyid Ghabayan. Meanwhile, in the northern West Bank city of Jenin, thousands of Palestinians sent off the bodies of Saleh Jaradat, 35, and Fadi Jaradat to their final resting places. The two citizens were killed yesterday when the Israeli occupation troops opened their heavy machine gun fire towards citizens in the city. President Arafat performed today the Friday congregational noon prayer at the mosque of their presidential compound in Ramallah city. The imam of the mosque condemned the Israeli military crimes carried out against the Palestinian people, calling on the Arab and Islamic nations to intervene immediately in order to halt these aggressions. President Arafat had also performed a prayer on the souls of the Palestinian martyrs who were killed by Israeli occupation army. In today's Israeli breaches, the Israeli occupation army established today military roadblocks along Jenin al-Jem road north of the West Bank and opened fire towards cars and pedestrians. Eyewitnesses said that the Israeli police jeeps backed by military vehicles established military roadblocks at Jenin's northern entrance and arrested a big number of Palestinians. In Hebron city, south of the West Bank, the Israeli occupation army, backed by military bulldozers, demolished at pre-dawn today a house owned by Abdul Mu'ti Shabani. Meanwhile, the Israeli army occupation keeps imposing curfew on most of Hebron's neighborhoods and carried out a widespread sabotaging campaign into the city's infrastructure, where power transmitters were completely destroyed, in addition to a big number of damages into water networks and sanitations. The Israeli army, backed by bulldozers and covered by Apache gunships, raided last night Tulkarem city amid heavy shooting and closed all the main entrances of Tulkarem refugee camp, barring paramedics and food supplies to enter the city and its refugee camp. While in the Gaza Strip, the Israeli occupation army still imposed tightened siege and curfew on Beit Hanun town for the second consecutive month. Eyewitnesses said that the occupation forces continued razing Palestinian-owned lands and houses in the town.
Recently, Israel and Hamas exchanged threats. Israel declared war on Hamas and threatened to kill its leaders. Hamas responded by asking all foreigners to leave the country for the sake of their lives and vowed to assassinate Ariel Sharon. The recent developments in the occupied territories have opened the door for many possibilities after the latest series of Israeli crimes against Hamas and the Palestinian people. In response to the violent threats made by Israel, Hamas called on foreign nationals to leave the lands occupied in 1948 and other Palestinian territories for their safety. Meanwhile, the military wing of Hamas, the Izz al-Din al-Qassam Brigade, called on all of its cells to work quickly and to respond like an earthquake, shaking the Hebrew country into rubble, as was released in their statements. Mahmoud al-Zahar, one of Hamas's leaders, vowed to assassinate the Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. He said that all the Israelis would be targeted in a speech that he gave in front of thousands of Palestinians who participated in a 10 martyrs funeral in Gaza. Meanwhile, another leader from Hamas, Ismail al-Haniya, said that the Israeli order to eradicate Hamas is equivalent to declaring a total war on the movement and on the Palestinian people. The Israeli army has received an order to fight Hamas in every possible way in order to destroy it. According to the Israeli military radio, the decision to destroy Hamas was made in a meeting between the Israeli military command and the defense minister Shaul Mufaz. The decision includes the destruction of both the infrastructure and political leadership of the movement. Israeli radio said that destroying Hamas would include its founder and spiritual leader Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. The Israeli Minister of Internal Security, Sahi Hanagbi, threatened to kill Hamas's leader and said that they do not have any immunity. The threats against Hamas coincide with Sharon announcing that he does not intend to change his policy of targeting what he called the leadership of terrorism. In a meeting that he held with his government, he said that he does not plan to wait for the Palestinian Security Agency to put an end to the Palestinian suicide operations, adding that Israel should help the Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas to stop the violence. Sharon described the Palestinian officials as complainers who do nothing to counter what he called terrorism. Meanwhile, the Palestinian leadership confirmed that the Israeli decision of escalating the war is going to kill every opportunity of peace which was created after the Sharm el-Sheikh and Al-Aqaba summits.
Palestinian leaders expressed concern Friday that the United States was giving a free hand to the Israeli military, pointing to statements by senior U.S. officials singling out the Palestinian group Hamas as the main culprit behind the escalation. Top advisor to Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, Nabil Abu Rudaina, asked the United States to put pressure on the Israeli government to halt its attacks, adding it is not acceptable to put pressure only on the Palestinian side because the Israelis are continuing their escalation and aggression. Rudaina said the spate of Israeli helicopter attacks that has killed 24 Palestinians this week will threaten efforts to implement the roadmap. And Ismail Abu Shanab, a senior Hamas official, earlier complained that the United States was encouraging Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon to wage war on the Palestinian people, saying U.S. statements can only promote new Zionist aggression and throw oil on the fire. Concerning the resumption of talks with Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas, a senior Hamas official who asked not to be named said the group had held consultations with members of Abbas's government, but no formal meetings at this stage. UN Secretary General Kofi Annan called for the dispatch of an international peacekeeping force to act as a buffer between the Israelis and Palestinians. Annan told the Israeli newspaper Haaretz that the intervention of US monitors to shepherd through President George W. Bush's so-called roadmap for peace probably would not be enough to bring an immediate halt to the bloodshed. He made his remarks as senior US diplomat John Wolf was expected in the Middle East to begin overseeing the implementation of the plan. Adel Al-Jubair, advisor to Saudi Crown Prince Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz, condemned so-called terrorism in all its forms, but refrained from openly criticizing Hamas. Al-Jubair criticized the Israeli government of Sharon at a press conference at the Saudi embassy in Washington, saying the humiliation of the occupation continues.
We have worked after the summit meeting between the Crown Prince Abdullah and President Bush in Crawford, Texas last spring on getting an agreement between the various Palestinian factions to work with the Palestinian Authority in order to move the peace process forward. We have not succeeded because the targeted assassinations of Palestinian leaders by Israel continues, the closures continue, the uprooting of trees and the demolition of homes continues, the humiliation of the occupation continues, and that environment makes it difficult to move the two parties together.
U.S. occupation forces continued Friday its largest and most lethal operation against suspected anti-U.S. elements in occupied Iraq. The U.S. Army said it killed over 70 Iraqis in the western part of the country during Operation Peninsula Strike. Also, the U.S. command said U.S. troops killed 27 people after coming under attack Friday in Balad, northeast of Baghdad. It added that an organized group of attackers fired rocket-propelled grenades at a 4th Infantry Division tank patrol in Balad and that U.S. tanks returned fire. In other developments,
developments. 3 Iraqis were wounded in clashes between U.S. troops and Iraqi civilians in the northern city of Mosul on Friday. And the U.S. Central Command said U.S. troops have detained 74 suspected al-Qaeda sympathizers in a raid in Kirkuk, also in northern Iraq.
Facing tough and organized resistance operations in Iraq, U.S. Occupation Command pressed with a new aggressive assault dubbed Operation Peninsula Strike for the 3rd consecutive day. Thousands of U.S. occupation troops, warplanes and attack helicopters were involved in fire exchange, mainly in an area centered on the Tigris River town of Dulwiya, some 70 kilometers north of Baghdad. A U.S. military spokesman said that more than 70 Iraqis were killed in an attack against what he claimed to be a terrorist training camp. Warplanes from the 101st Airborne Division led the attack.
So many American troops fall down from the air, more than thousands from the air. They fall down on the bases of the houses in all areas. And on my houses also, me and my brothers. I can say this action more than Al-Normandy action, what happened on 1944. My older brother were killed. My cousin were killed also. Another one in the same area killed. In the north area, some person were killed.
Coalition forces in Iraq aggressively seek out individuals and groups that oppose our mission and the objectives of the coalition. As we have actionable intelligence, we strike hard and with great lethality and effectiveness. These friendly actions cause the enemy to react. If he's not killed or apprehended, he will try to move and strike back. We in turn are looking for those enemy response actions.
McKinnon confirmed that U.S. forces lost an Apache attack helicopter due to hostile fire, while U.S. Occupation Command admitted a fire jet was also lost and claimed the reason to be technical. Troops involved in the operation said the heavily wooded area provided good cover for ambushes, but searches failed to turn up more than a few light arms and rocket-propelled grenades, weaponry commonly found all over Iraq. Occupation forces detained some 400 Iraqi civilians, some of which were gravely injured. U.S. Central Command spokesman Lieutenant General Ryan Fitzgerald said the detainees were deemed not hostile. However, one of the detainees died of heavy wounds, and according to U.S. Central Command, he was shot dead as he was trying to escape. As American occupation troops carried out a new wave of aggressions in Iraq, the country's U.S. Administrator Paul Bremer has banned what he called anti-American activities. Testifying before the House Armed Services Committee via satellite from Baghdad, Paul Bremer on Thursday banned gatherings, pronouncements, or publications that incite what he called disorder or violence against U.S.-led occupation forces.
We are seeing organized attacks now. It's important to be clear that as far as we can tell, these are still small scale, that is to say 5 or 6 people, maybe 10 at a time. There does not yet appear to be evidence of central command and control of these attacks, but they are, to answer your question, organized, and we have to deal with them.
Fires blazed on a major pipeline from Iraq's northern oil fields Friday after what residents said were twin bomb attacks aimed at sabotaging exports through Turkey. Witnesses saw 2 separate fires on the pipeline 15 kilometers from the key refinery town of Baiji, close to the main highway between Baghdad and the northern regional capital of Mosul. This came after Iraq's US-led administration awarded Thursday a raft of contracts to international oil companies to lift crude, the first since the US-led war. US-led occupation forces in Iraq have stopped Iraqi refugees in Iran from returning home. Ahmed Husseini, Director General of Refugee Affairs at Iran's Interior Ministry, said the move had caused unrest among the 200,000 Iraqi refugees in the Islamic Republic. Yes, National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice took tough aim at Iran, warning it not to meddle in the formation of new power structures in Iraq and to halt any alleged banned weapons programs. The top official also warned Tehran that Washington was keeping a close eye on Iran's possible involvement with so-called international terrorism. Iran strongly rejects Washington's accusations as part of its campaign against the Islamic Republic.
As Arab governments
Professor Hosni Khashaba, do the Palestinians have a solid agenda to refuse the political pressure of President Bush?
Yes, I think that the Palestinians have a solid agenda, but we must first answer the question, what happened in Al-Aqaba and Sharm el-Sheikh summits? The Al-Aqaba summit was intended to make declarations about intentions of making peace, just for making declarations. Although Abu Mazen ignored mentioning some points, that does not mean he was giving them up. Thus, I do not think that it is very dangerous to ignore some points. The danger will come next. It will come if the Palestinians have a weak position when they start the actual negotiations. As an independent observer, I think that the Al-Aqaba summit was only intended for making declarations. There was a pressure on Israel and Sharon in particular to restart the peace process, but without having to do anything at this time. Previously, we talked about this. In reality, the whole thing is a show to absorb the popular anger which has created fear in the West. Tony Blair, who entered the war in Iraq with the United States, pressured George Bush to speed up the peace process, warning him that ordinary Arabs may soon rebel against their own governments. What is happening now is an attempt to absorb the Arab anger by making them think that there is a peace process. No negotiations happened in the Al-Aqaba summit. George Bush pressured Sharon to make technical concessions, but Abu Mazen did not make any real concessions. He did ignore to mention some issues.
He offered to stop the armed resistance. That is an important issue.
Yes, he offered that, but the Palestinian Authority took that position a long time ago. On several occasions, Yasser Arafat condemned the suicide operations and considered them terrorism. Thus, this is not a new position. It is a risk. Abu Mazen is making a bet. The Palestinian position is weak and the Arab position is even weaker. Yes, giving up the armed resistance is a Palestinian concession. However, Abu Mazen did not give up anything yet.
Do you think that Bush has done anything to help Abu Mazen to stop the armed intifada? Bush said that Hamas members are killers and acknowledged Israel as a Jewish state. Does that help Abu Mazen to convince Hamas and other Palestinian factions to stop the intifada?
In reality, what was said about the Jewish state was only a diplomatic maneuver. I must say that the peace process at the current time, in the way it has been conducted, will not lead to anything at all. However, the world thinks that the ball is in the Palestinian court. The Palestinians should not make it look like they are the aggressors. They should not make it look like they are refusing to reach a political settlement. They must play the game the same way Sharon is playing it right now. Let me tell you what was said about Shimon Peres when he was the foreign minister in Sharon's government. At the end of the meeting, he said, "Ariel, you are a problem. When you are asked to make peace, you say no, which makes you look like an extremist. When I'm asked to make peace, I say yes, but, which makes me look like a peacemaker." Since then, Sharon has taken Peres' advice. The way the peace process is going on right now will not lead to anything at all until the U.S. elections are resolved. Nonetheless, the Palestinians must show the world and American voters that Sharon is the one rejecting the peace process. Failing to do so is a dangerous sign of weakness. The Palestinians can benefit politically. Without a doubt, they can benefit. The U.S. is the greatest power in the world, and it is sympathetic to the notion of establishing an independent Palestinian state with a geographic continuity. Its size and borders is another topic. The Palestinians have made a lot of concessions on the ground after the reoccupation by the Israeli army and the huge devastations of the Palestinian people and their infrastructure caused by Sharon. The Palestinian negotiators should not lose the opportunity to benefit politically. The current peace process, the way it is being conducted, is only a show. Some Western political analysts described it as a window dressing.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation,